We know all of us possess knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Anyone who claims to know something does not yet have the necessary knowledge, but anyone who loves God is known by him. Hence, as to the eating of food offered to idols, we know that no idol in the world really exists, and that there is no God but one. Indeed, even though there may be so-called gods in heaven and on earth, as in fact there are many gods and many lords, yet for us there is one God, the Father, from whom all things and for whom we exist, and the one Lord Jesus Christ, through whom are all things and through whom we exist. It is not everyone however, who has this knowledge. Since some have become so accustomed to idols until now, they still think the food they eat as food offered to idols, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled. Food will not bring us close to God. We are no worse off if we do not eat, and no better off if we do. But take care that this liberty of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block for the weak. For if others see you, who possess knowledge, eating in the temple of an idol, might they not, since their conscience is weak, be encouraged to the point of eating food sacrificed to idols? So by your knowledge, those weak believers for whom Christ died are destroyed. But when you thus sin against members of your family and wound their conscience when it is weak, you sin against Christ. Therefore, if food is a cause for their falling, I will never eat meat, so that I may not cause one of them to fall. From the Gospel according to Mark in the 12th chapter, please stand as you are able for the reading of the Gospel. One of the scribes came near and heard them disputing with one another. And seeing that he answered them well, he asked him, "Which commandment is first of all?" Jesus answered, "The first one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these." Then the scribe said, "You are right, teacher. You have truly said, Teacher, you have truly said that he is one, and besides him there is no other. And to love him with all the heart and with all the understanding and with all the strength, and to love one's neighbor as oneself. This is much more important than all the whole burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." After that, no one dared to ask him any questions. This is the word and the wisdom of God. How many of you remember your first cell phone? Or how about your first computer or first stereo? I remember my first stereo. I inherited it from my grandfather, and it was a big hi-fi, one of these big pieces of furniture. It was huge, and I really felt sorry for it because it had to start playing Santana instead of Lawrence Welk. Our first cell phone was a block, like a toy block. It was, huge. It was like this. You had to grip it with your whole hand. Does anybody remember a cell phone like that? We got on a cheap plan. I think it was Consumer Cellular, and we wanted to sparingly use it for convenience and emergencies only. That plan didn't last out the year. From the beginning, I've been kind of suspect of cell phones. Part of it is because I suffer from phonophobia, and because I sensed that these little devices are going to take over our world. And then I wondered, how are they going to affect us? One adage for new inventions is that they will change us whether we want them to or not. Take the microwave oven. We all remember not having one? We all remember not having one? Oh, microwaves, wonderful. We save so much time, but this is what we did. Previously, we scheduled enough time so that we could cook dinner. Now we have the microwave, so once in a while we can play a little more, work a little more, come back a little later, and still have a healthy choice. It slides into habit. Pretty soon it's not once in a while, but every night's Swanson's. And the fact is, because of the microwave, we are actually more busy. There's one family I know who doesn't have a microwave. This is a young family. I'm amazed. And I'm not going to reveal it because I don't want to fear shaming them. But how can they sin against this great American progress called the microwave? I'm kidding. I admire them. I don't know if I could do that. Consider how momentous the effect of the automobile and how it has changed us. It is essentially a personal travel device. Because it's personal, it naturally divides and isolates. No more sitting next to some stranger on the train and having to converse with them. No more standing on the bus. No more going to the train station and again running into Bill and he has to talk about his golf game. None of that. We're so free of all these people who bother us. The car has made us independent. There are fewer hassles. And we are more driven. We are more selfish. We are more arrogant. And we are more rude because of the automobile. Cell phones, before they come along, one of the things I remember liking about the automobile is getting on the freeway and knowing I could not be contacted no more. How about the television? Do you ever watch old movies before the TV in which people are sitting around a room and they're in chairs reading books and everything, and when you say, how did they survive that? With no technology, they must have been terribly bored, which they weren't. What do we do without the internet? How did they live without the internet? How did they communicate? And all of this behind this is that the television has stunted our attention span and our patience. And it has given us the pandemic of multitasking. Should I say anything about automatic rifles like the AR-15? Touch it and it will change you. My professor at seminary, David Ray Griffin, said the second maxim for new inventions is that they all present an equal opportunity for good and evil. Take the cell phone, please. Just think of all that we do with that tiny device. Just take texting alone. I really like texting and all the convenience and the emergencies. What did we do when our car broke down on the freeway before the cell phone? I can talk to my brother in France for nothing. When I was in Japan, if I wanted to talk to my parents, few 100,000 yen. No, few 10,000 yen. The big invention when I was in Japan was Walkman. Everybody remember the Walkman? Oh, that was cool. I still remember putting on those speakers, and I could not believe the quality of the music. It was wonderful. But now, if you see somebody, not so much with Walkman, but earbuds, what does that communicate? Don't bother me. Which also isolates. Here's the problem. We take on these inventions with great enthusiasm. They're wonderful. We wait, and we wait for the next upgrade. We're so into all of this that we're not discerning. We're not asking how they are good and how they are evil. Largely, we don't think about it. And we should. In the epistle for today, Paul is orating about food sacrificed to idols. I know many of you know this story. Some people have this knowledge that the food sacrificed to our idols will not hurt them. On the other hand, Paul points out there are people who do not have that knowledge and are fearful of the food sacrificed to idols. So the people eating the food will harm the people who are afraid of it. Doesn't matter why they can't do that. It is, does it harm them? Generally speaking, I have to say, when there are personal decisions, all personal decisions affect people. And I say, in our relational world full of interdependencies, there really isn't anything that we can call an absolute personal decision or choice. The new invention for the Corinthians was the idea of freedom. Paul says, take care that this liberty of yours does not somehow become a stumbling block for the weak. Think about the weak. This is the message I want to get to those who are resisting getting vaccinated, particularly because of a religious reason. Those of you who remember, one of my emails I wrote about an article that was in the Seattle Times that was written, an op-ed written by a firefighter named Lance Garland. He was bemoaning the loss of fellow firefighters who did not choose to get vaccinated and therefore left their jobs. And here's a difference in language. Mr. Garland was saying they lost their jobs, but did they lose their jobs or did they leave their jobs? Garland said they were forced out of their jobs. Were they forced out of their jobs or were they given a reasonable choice about their jobs? I feel, he says, you have to have mercy for all these families. Yes, we have mercy, but we just don't have agreement. Language is important. How things are thought out or not thought out is important. We have agreement. We have compassion, but not agreement. And in the end, I want to say to Mr. Garland, please think a little more. Faced with all that is there, think a little more about who is dying, who is victimized, and who is hurting. Discernment doesn't work if our minds are too full and too busy. Hectic lives we have, and we have ourselves full of beliefs, pretensions, arguments, feelings, and resentments. I think the majority of Americans spend most of their thinking time trying to solidify their opinions so that they can be right. That's a closed mind. An open mind begins with emptying our minds of all of our biases and listening intently. Open minds also ask questions about everything and how everything that comes along affects not only myself, but everyone. We have to ask questions about everything that comes our way. How will this affect the poor? How will this affect our children? How will it affect the tree frogs and the spotted owl? 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul says, all things are lawful, but not all things are not beneficial. Again, all things are lawful, all things are not beneficial. Paul is frequently asking whether this or that will build up the community. That's what he wanted. He was concerned about the common good of the churches that he built. He told them they were now free of the law, but the Corinthians took that to mean that they had license to do whatever they wanted. For Paul, the freedom offered them was freedom from the law and freedom to serve Christ. With everything that comes our way, we are called to a practice of discernment, to use our mind to see how things are good and evil. And if we don't do that, inertia will surely push things to evil. When we entered this surreal journey, you might remember some time ago that our bishop gave us guidance by bringing up the general rules. And I know you all know the general rules by now, right? This is where I want people to find out how they react. Anyway, first, general rule, do no harm. For Wesley, he then added a long list of what things that you shouldn't do: slaveholding, uncharitable conversation, fighting, quarreling, brawling, self-indulgence, laying treasure on earth, and etc. The second general rule is do good of every kind. And the third general rule is practice the ordinance of God. In my mind, these general rules are criteria for the practice of discernment. When we ask whether something is good or evil, we ask if there has been or will be any harm brought to anybody by this. Is anyone being hurt? Used to be we all talking about what's right and wrong. I think the question needs to be changed when we think about whether something is right and wrong, and ask, is anybody hurt? The gospel text for this Sunday, the first and the greatest commandment, to love God and to love our neighbor as ourself. This also can be a criterion for discernment, to ask, is this loving my neighbor? Is this hurting my neighbor? In everything we do. Getting back to cell phones, does anybody get hurt by the cell phone? I think so. Or let's take Facebook, since that's in the news. This internal assessment inside of Facebook came out that says that they actually had algorithms that tended to enhance extreme and hateful speech. Is that good or is that evil? And these platforms tend towards shaming, embarrassing, abusing, and hurting young people, particularly young women. I use Facebook. I like Facebook. I like to post my pictures on Facebook. But algorithms are encouraging extreme content and encouraging bullying. It's an evil thing, and it's not good for my neighbor. Of course, Facebook wants to change the name, get a little distance. Did everybody hear that? No longer Facebook, it's called Meta. For the metaverse. Here's a sentence about the metaverse. We're the more inclusive concept of cyberspace that reflects the total of shared online space across all dimensions of representation. Do you understand that? I think that sounds a little scary. As the Corinthians were excited about the idea of freedom, are we going to get excited about the metaverse in the same way? Not ask, what is this? And what is good about this? And let's be careful about what is not. In 1835, French diplomat Alexis de Tocqueville authored his seminal book, Democracy in America. He came to America to observe this new thing called democracy. His biggest conclusion was, democracy will only work if the populace is educated, whether they can discern between good and evil, whether they have a mind that critically thinks. Some point to threats of democracy on the outside. I see the biggest threat to democracy on the inside, that we do not discern or think or listen or observe enough. We are over-entertained. Our first response to things is complaint. What does it mean to be educated in America today? Are questions being asked, or is every new thing simply accepted? I tell you that if America loses democracy, it will be for lack of education. Back to the cell phone. Many times I just want to throw it in the Puget Sound. I don't because it is a necessary utility I must cope with. But coping includes discerning about it, what is good and what is evil. My most grave concern about the cell phone is that they will replace people. I know that sounds funny, that they will become more important than relationships, that they will actually become our best friends. I know it sounds silly, but did you see that movie called Her with Joaquin Phoenix? He falls in love with a computer avatar. I have to say, there's a lot less drama with a computer avatar who does everything that you want. Is that a relationship? Is this prescient? When youth feel more comfortable talking to their friends through their phones than meeting them in person, it's something to think about. We need a ministry of discernment, taking responsibility to consider good and evil in everything. And I'm sorry, folks, but I have to include football. Go Beavs, I love football, but I also know that's a great deal of people get hurt. Extreme violence causes a disease called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Can you imagine being the spouse of a player who has that? And we have to ask, are we doing due diligence to make football less hurtful? I fear that football is so important to America that we can't do it. Those who refuse to get vaccinated must ask of themselves, is anyone being hurt? All things are lawful, but not all things are not beneficial. Not every upgrade is not good. Just because we have the freedom to avoid vaccination doesn't mean we don't have to consider the effects of not getting vaccinated on the common good. We all need to think a little more. Well, have we created algorithms to do our thinking for us, or really to do our hating for us? Is the algorithm becoming the substitute for an interior moral compass? The church needs to be a place to practice open-minded discernment. That is one of our callings in this world. Is anybody hurt? We don't ask the black and white question about right and wrong, in which oftentimes we make ourselves the right and everybody else the wrong. We ask of friends and foe alike, is anyone being harmed? Now, admittedly, compared to other churches, we're a little bit slow on reopening. It vexes me a little, but I feel assured that we have not done any harm. And when it's over, it will be time to take on the two other general rules: to do good of every kind with faithfulness, vigor, and enthusiasm, and to faithfully practice together again the ordinances of God, which includes being able to be in this place and worship together. In anything that comes before us, could anybody be hurt? We ask that of Halloween, with the children wandering around. We have to ask it also of climate change. Will anyone be harmed? Only we had paid attention 30 years ago. With voting, taxation, armaments, healthcare, children, the answer is yes. People do get harmed. Whatever it is, we need to think. We need to think a little more about others. If we don't, we might as well just throw our cell phones into the drink. Amen.